When my father passed, the inheritance papers listed only one item under my name, Argus Outpost. A decaying, half-forgotten space station drifting on the rim of civilized space. Other officers' children received medals polished in glass cases, estates on fertile worlds, or comfortable seats in the Admiralty. I received rust and silence. At the memorial banquet, the senior commanders drank their wine and smirked openly at me. One even raised a glass and said, "To inheriting junk." Laughter rippled through the hall like static. I said nothing, but my daughter, Aria, sat beside me with her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. She was only 12, but already she hated mockery more fiercely than I ever could. 2 weeks later, we left for the outpost. The shuttle was cramped, loaded with the few belongings we owned, and every mile farther from Earth felt like we were sinking into exile. The docking clamps groaned as we approached the station, and for a moment I feared the airlocks wouldn't even seal. The first breath inside tasted like rust and stale oxygen, a bitter scent that clung to the walls. Lights flickered weakly overhead, and the corridors stretched out in oppressive silence. No crew. No greetings. Just the echo of our own footsteps. Yet Aria's eyes darted around in wonder. Where I saw dead steel, she saw adventure. She ran her hand along the pitted wall and whispered, "Papa, this is ours now, isn't it?" The words caught me off guard. In her voice I heard pride, not shame. I looked around again, this time not as a weary soldier but as a father. Yes, the place was broken, forgotten, and mocked. But it was ours. And in that moment, I felt something stir, something my father must have known all along. The first night on the outpost was uneasy in ways I hadn't expected. The silence pressed down on us like a physical weight. Even when the machinery hummed faintly in the background, there was no comfort in the sound. It was the groan of something too old, too tired, barely clinging to life. I stayed in the command center, hunched over the cracked console, trying to coax the systems into revealing something useful. Aria wouldn't leave my side, clutching her dragon toy while her eyes followed every flicker of light on the monitors. She was brave, but even she couldn't hide the unease of being the only child in a place that felt more tomb than home. Most of the station's logs were corrupted beyond repair, but fragments bled through the static. Argus hadn't been just another military outpost, it had been built for something secret. Project Aegis appeared again and again in the broken data, but whenever I dug deeper, the files stopped, cut short as if erased in a hurry. There were sudden shutdown orders, a recall of personnel, and then nothing. No explanation. No final report. Just silence, like someone had wanted it buried. That night, while the diagnostics ran, I heard it, footsteps. Metallic, steady, echoing down the corridor outside the command deck. I grabbed a tool as a makeshift weapon and searched, every sense sharpened, but the halls were empty. No intruder, no sign of life. When I returned, Aria was sitting upright in her cot, eyes wide, whispering that she'd seen shadows slipping through the walls. I told her it was nothing but failing lights and her imagination. But deep down, I knew I was lying. The station wasn't as empty as it pretended to be. Something was still here, lingering in the dark. By the third week, the outpost had settled into a strange rhythm. I spent my days coaxing life out of the station systems while Aria explored every corridor like a little scout. She had a knack for finding things, cracked panels, hidden hatches, storage rooms I had overlooked. One evening, she came running to me with dust smeared across her face, eyes alight with excitement. "Papa, there's a door that isn't on your map," she whispered, tugging my sleeve. She led me to the lower decks, where most of the bulkheads had been sealed since before my birth. One section of wall looked wrong, painted over clumsily, as if someone had wanted to erase its existence. I pried at the seams until my hands bled, and beneath the flaking paint we found a hatch, its manual lock fused shut. With some effort, and a pulse of emergency power, it groaned open, revealing a narrow passage that led us into the bowels of the station. What lay beyond didn't belong to a forgotten outpost. The chamber glowed faintly blue, like starlight captured and frozen. At its center hovered a massive crystalline structure, suspended in magnetic fields, pulsing gently as though it were alive. The console identified it as the Aegis node, though the files offered no explanation. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't standard human engineering. The lines, the patterns, the hum, it felt older, stranger, something fused between human craft and something else. Aria reached out before I could stop her. The instant her small hand brushed its surface, the entire station surged awake. Lights blazed down every corridor, the power grid roared back online, and Argus Outpost shuddered as though it were drawing breath for the first time in decades. Then the alarms began, not inside, but from orbit. Something had noticed us. The first ships appeared on the station's long-range scanners less than an hour after the alarms began. At first, I thought they were patrols or traders cutting through forgotten space, but the comms chatter told me otherwise. Scavengers. Raiders. A loose fleet of pirates who fed on derelicts like carrion birds. To them, Argus Outpost must have looked like easy prey, a rusting husk with no defenses, ripe for stripping. Their laughter carried over the open channel, cruel and confident. They promised to peel the station apart and sell us for spare organs. I stood at the console, pulse pounding, torn between preparing Arya for escape or standing our ground. Before I could decide, the station itself answered. Metal shrieked as ancient panels along the hull slid open, revealing turrets I hadn't even known existed. Shield projectors flickered to life, rippling like molten silver around the outpost. Power readings spiked across the grid, so high they made the consoles tremble beneath my hands. The raiders opened fire first. Bright streaks of plasma hammered the shields, splashing harmlessly against their surface. Then the outpost struck back. A single turret locked onto the lead ship and fired, an incandescent bolt that tore through its hull and reduced it to slag in an instant. The laughter on the comms dissolved into panic. They tried to regroup, but the Argus was awake now. More turrets unfolded, targeting systems tracking every enemy movement with surgical precision. Another ship went up in flames, then another. The survivors broke and ran, their retreat desperate, engines flaring as they fled into warp. Arya gripped my arm, her face pale, eyes wide with awe. And then, through the static of the comms, a new voice filled the command center, calm, steady, unmistakably artificial. "Commander recognized," it said. "Defense protocols active." The outpost wasn't a ruin. It was a weapon. And now it had chosen us. Word of what happened spread faster than I could have imagined. Within a week, encrypted messages from Earth were flooding in. At first, they sounded polite, requests for reports, offers to assist with operations, veiled inquiries about the outpost condition. Then the tone shifted. Demands. Orders. The Admiralty insisted I surrender Argus Outpost and return immediately for reassignment. They called it a matter of security. I knew better. They didn't want to help, they wanted to take. Meanwhile, Arya grew quieter. She spent long hours near the Aegis node, sitting cross-legged on the floor as its blue glow washed over her face. When I asked what she was doing, she simply said, listening. She claimed it spoke to her, not with words but with images, dreams of great walls of light stretching across the stars, of ships sheltering beneath its protection. I wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the way the node responded when she touched it made me wonder. The lights would brighten, the hum would rise in pitch, almost as though it recognized her. Then came the second fleet. This time, it wasn't scavengers. Their ships were sleek, metallic, alive with unfamiliar energy signatures. Aliens. My blood ran cold when I realized who they were, the same species our history books insisted had been wiped out in the wars 2 centuries ago. Yet here they were, very real, and very interested in the node. They didn't waste time with mockery. They sent a single transmission, their voices like iron scraping against glass, relinquish the core. No threats. No negotiation. Just certainty. They wanted what lay at the heart of Argus. And as I stood there, watching their fleet assemble like a storm, one truth crystallized in my mind. This wasn't about us inheriting an old station. This was about something buried deep inside it, something worth starting a war over. The alien fleet moved with terrifying precision. Their formation tightened around the outpost like a noose, and the air in the command deck grew heavy with the realization that we were alone. No reinforcements were coming. Earth hadn't even answered our last transmission. It was just me, my daughter, and a station whose secrets I still didn't understand. The first salvo hit our shields with enough force to make the deck shudder. Warning lights flared across the consoles, but the Aegis node pulsed in response, stabilizing the defenses before collapse. I braced myself for the inevitable breach. That's when Arya climbed onto the chair beside me, her small fingers flying across the controls with a speed I hadn't taught her. It was as if she already knew the systems, as though the node was guiding her. "Papa, it listens," she said breathlessly. "But not to you. To me." I wanted to tell her to step back, to hide, to let me carry the fight, but the station seemed to answer only her touch. Drones I didn't know existed deployed from hidden bays. Automated gun batteries reoriented, firing in perfect synchrony. Every time Arya issued a command, the node magnified it, amplifying her will into the outpost itself. The aliens pressed harder, carving chunks of metal from the outer hull. I prepared for the moment they would break through, forcing myself to accept the thought of dying here with her. But Arya turned to me, eyes glowing with reflected blue light, and said with a conviction far beyond her years, "It chose us. Not them. Not Earth. Us." The node's glow intensified, flooding the command center in blinding radiance. The station trembled, not with damage, but with transformation. Argus Outpost was about to reveal its true purpose. The walls groaned and shifted as though the station itself had been waiting centuries for this moment. Bulkheads retracted, hidden panels unlocked, and entire sections of the outpost realigned into patterns I could barely comprehend. Argus was no longer a derelict husk clinging to life, it was something alive, reshaping itself with the will of the node. Through the viewport, I watched as colossal spires extended from the hull, weaving together with energy fields that rippled like liquid light. It was beautiful, terrifying, and beyond anything human engineers could have built. The alien fleet opened fire with everything they had, lances of plasma and beams of exotic matter tearing through the void. But when their weapons struck, they simply vanished against a shimmering barrier that bloomed outward from the outpost. Not a shield around us alone, but a field vast enough to encompass an entire system. The node's purpose became clear. Argus wasn't just a station. It was the heart of a defense array designed to shelter whole worlds. The aliens faltered. For the first time, their precise formation broke. They unleashed another volley, but the barrier held. Then the node answered in kind. A pulse surged outward, invisible but devastating. Enemy ships shuddered, systems failed, hulls fractured as though crushed by unseen hands. One by one, their vessels broke apart, until silence reclaimed the void. I stood frozen, trying to grasp what we had unleashed. Arya's face glowed with pride and wonder as she stared into the radiance of the node. To the Admiralty, to the galaxy, we were no longer inheritors of junk. We were the guardians of Argus, the keepers of a shield that could turn the tide of wars. And as I placed a hand on my daughter's shoulder, I understood, the station hadn't chosen me. It had chosen her. Together, we were humanity's shield.